What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving my reaction and review of the second episode of the STARZ historical romance drama, Outlander, Blood of My Blood. And just so you guys know, this video will contain mild spoilers, so if you haven't gotten around to watching this episode yet and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. I thought episode 1 was interesting in all the ways I anticipated an Outlander story to be. I thought the story got off to a really good start, showing us again events that we had only heard about in Outlander seasons long past. And seeing the characters in their much younger years and watching them set into motion the events that would solidify who they would be when we first met them in Outlander season 1 was definitely worth the watch. And I'm truly looking forward to seeing how the rest of the season will shake out, including whether or not Henry ever lays eyes on his wife Julia between now and then. Now, episode 2, entitled SWAK, starts on the Western Front in Belgium, smack dab in the middle of World War I, the Great War for those who fought in it. And we see how Henry and Julia met and were married, that Henry wrote an open letter asking what there was to live for given his current circumstances. And we see that Julia, working in a redaction office in London, an office that received that letter, wrote him back, and through sharing correspondence, the two actually became close. Now, I thought this episode did a fairly decent job of bringing the war into the episode, both with Henry on the Western Front and with Julia in London, as London was being bombarded by the enemy from the air. The writers do make a point to show us that Julia has a fascination with Scotland, and of course this leads the pair to take their honeymoon after their rather impromptu wedding, which I found to be a nice touch, both for the characters and for the story as a whole. Now, I thought it was actually crazy how the pair met for the first time, because they actually meet, one walking up the stairs and one walking down the stairs, out and about in town. And look, this meeting was straight out of a romance novel. I kid you not. But that's Outlander style. So, I guess, also, I assume that there must have been a letter or two wherein a picture was sent, at least on Julia's behalf. So, it's a speeding ticket. I'm not going to make too much of a big deal about it, but it did kind of feel like they just kind of walked past each other, locked eyes, and was like, "Oh, it's you. Oh, it's you." Like, it kind of felt a little too good to be true. But again, like I said, that's kind of the magic of this series. So, whatever will be, right? Now, we did get some boot knocking in this episode, which overall I was okay with, given, what we've become accustomed to watching the OG series. And narratively, it made sense, given that the pair does get married in this episode. So, honeymoon sex is I guess required, isn't it? And the fact that Julia now has a ring with a gemstone in it is really important if you know how time travel works in the world of Outlander. And this will go back to the previous episode where she goes through the stones. She would have needed that gemstone in her ring to actually go through the stones. And so this was kind of an important touch, right? We see how the war has truly affected Henry. He has these nightmares that Julia kind of has to comfort him. When he kind of wakes up screaming and sweating and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sure this will come into play a little bit later. And how Julia is kind of there, like I said, to be his anchor, kind of solidifying just how important she is to him. Again, I thought that was a nice touch. Now, the second half of the episode focuses on how Julia became housemaid to Simon Fraser, Lord Lovett, currently of Leathers. And if you paid close enough attention, we've already seen Julia as Simon Fraser's housemaid in the pilot episode, right? We also learn here that Julia is in 1714, and the same year the pilot episode takes place in, right? So she went through the stones. She ends up in 1714, but it's fairly close to Red Jacob's death, and everybody kind of coming together, because that happens in 1714 as well, at Castle Leoch. We also see that Henry arrives at what feels like it's the same time, but a different place, as he follows Julia through the stones, and he becomes, through some maneuvering, a trusted advisor to Clan Grant, which we also know because we see him in said position in the pilot episode. He was at Castle Leoch, and he did some talking to Red Jacob's advisor when he asked him, how did you end up, in Scotland? You know what I'm saying? And so he kind of had to make up this story and that kind of thing. Now, we do see Julia try to escape in this episode, which makes some sense, right? And Brian Fraser not only stops her, but he takes the punishment that was meant for her, and it feels totally like something that he would do, right? It's something that Jamie would do, something that Jamie has done in the OG series. And we're able to see that Henry arrived through the stones precisely 1 month before the gathering at Castle Leoch that we saw in the pilot. So 1 month before Red Jacob's passing is exactly when Henry passed through the stones. So this and the fresh etchings on the rock at Craignadoon that were left by Julia proves that he's in 1714 as well. And the episode ends with the pair separated, but writing to each other just like they had in their own time, sealed with a kiss. Now, overall, I'd give this episode an 80% or an 8.0 if you're thinking IMDb score. Now, after having watched now the first and the second episodes in this series, I wonder if the second episode should have been the first and the first the second, if for no other reason than to ground us, the viewers, in a better sense of time, as I'm sure time is about to get complicated, wherein this show is concerned. And so I think that it might have been better to switch the episodes and just start with Henry and Julia, because, we would have watched them go through the stones, kind of get fixed it, get situated with their groups, and then episode 1 of this series would have been episode 2, where we actually see Henry show up at Castle Leoch, and that all would have, I think flowed a little bit better, right? Other than that, I thought this episode was pretty thorough, though I guess there was more than enough time to be so, as we did get another pretty long episode, almost 60 minutes. Now, I think things are about to get downright interesting at this point, both from a narrative and historical standpoint. And, I love the history stuff. So, I'm all here for that. And, that's what has made this, I think, a show that's certainly geared towards women with the kind of romance novel feel to it. Something that, as a man, I myself even found to be fairly enjoyable. And as we can probably guess, certainly if you're one of the people who has seen OG Outlander, again, I'll say that Claire's parents likely will never make it back to their own time. But this episode presents a great many questions that now involve both shows, like, will Henry and Julia ever be able to be with each other again? Will they find each other again? I'm sure they will. But will they ever be able to be with each other again is going to be the actual question that I'm going to pose. And will Claire or Brianna come face to face with either of them in the last season of Outlander? Because I want you guys to remember that Brianna and Roger and their kids and everything are kind of traveling and shuffling through time looking for each other. And Brianna has come face to face with Brian Fraser. And so I wonder if, they will end up meeting Claire's parents at some point thereafter. If they do, it might speak to why this show is premiering now, before the last season of Outlander airs. And if indeed that's the case, I can't lie to you guys, that would be something I'd completely be down to see. But what do you guys think? Have you had a chance to watch the second episode of Outlander Blood of My Blood yet? If you have, do you think the second episode should have been the first episode in the series and the first the second? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. You can also now support the channel by leaving a super thanks. If you should be so inclined, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, Be sure to go and check out themadScreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. And I'll catch y'all on the next video.